me this platform today. And thank you, my previous speaker, Dr. Subramaniam sir, because you have made my job very easy actually. So welcome all of you delegates who have managed time to listen to this scientific enrichment program on some of the practical aspects of diabetes management. So what I will be focusing on is a case-based discussion on rationale of or utility of combination of empagliflozin and linagliptin, the theoretical advantages of combining two drugs, or for that matter, combining an SGLT2 inhibitors and DPP4 inhibitor, has been already dealt by my previous speaker. But we'll also be taking you through a short theoretical discussion, you can say re-emphasizing on the advantages of EMPA-LINA combination in the second part of the presentation. So let us begin with the case presentation. So we'll be discussing a case of a college professor, Mrs. Kamal, who is 54-year-old female. She is diabetic for around 4 years. During routine checkup, she is complaining of generalized weakness. She had an hospitalization for acute coronary syndrome about a year back. She also had a family history of premature cardiovascular event. She is obese. Her BMI is around 30. She is also hypertensive, but her blood pressure is not under control. Her blood pressure is around 146 by 86 millimeter Hg. Her HbA1c is 8.4%. Her fasting plasma glucose is 165 milligram per dl and postprandial plasma glucose is 280 milligram per dl. Her LDL cholesterol is 75 milligram per dl. A 2D echocardiography done suggests an ejection fraction of 55%, but with slightly dilated left atrium and right atrium. She also has retinopathy, which is stable, non-proliferative. She has a sedentary lifestyle and do not want any further weight gain. In fact, a little weight loss will make her happy. She also complains of occasional symptoms which are suggestive of hypoglycemia. She is currently on sulfonylureas and metformin combination, glimepiride 4 mg she is taking. Metformin she is taking 1 gram twice daily. She is also on angiotensin receptor blocker, losartan 50 milligram once daily. She is on atorvastatin 40 milligram. Her antihypertensive also includes amlodipine 5 milligram, chlorothalidone 15 milligram, I think it should be 12.5 milligram, metoprolol XR 50 milligram, and aspirin 75 milligram daily. So before we discuss this case, we need to understand what are the issues of concern for Mrs. Kamal and what are the issues for concern of the endocrinologist who will treat her, or for that matter, the stakeholder of diabetes management who will treat her. So Mrs. Kamal's concern are, she of course wants good glycemic control, like any of our diabetic patient, anyone and everyone wants it. She also is little bothered about her blood pressure. She does not want any further weight gain, and she wants to lead a hypoglycemia free life if that is possible, or she doesn't want to have the recurrent episodes of hypoglycemia. So let us see whether we can help her or not. The physician's concern for her are, of course, her concerns are therefore automatically becomes the physician's concern. There's no doubt in it. But apart from her concerns, the physician has some other concerns also. Like the physician is also bothered about that she being just diabetic for 4 years and being a 54-year-old, 54, 54 is nowadays, it is young. It is not even middle age. So since she's just 54 years and diabetic for only 4 years. So her physician is wondering what should be her HbA1c goal. Should he or she to target her HbA1c to 6.5% or less, or should it be 7%, or should it be 7.5%, or should it be more? So for that, we need to understand that the ideal HbA1c Though we all know this, that the lower the HbA1c, the lesser is the chance of microvascular complications like retinopathy, neuropathy, and nephropathy. Mrs. Kamal already has a stable non-proliferative retinopathy. So of course, this is an issue of concern for us that her retinopathy should not progress further. She should not develop nephropathy or neuropathy, which luckily she does not have still now. But then how low the HbA1c can go? Uh, HbA1c target should be 6.5% for someone who is not on insulin secretagogues and someone who is having a otherwise healthy profile, not having any other comorbidity, and the treatment should not incur extra risk of hypoglycemias. Otherwise, for almost all persons, the HbA1c target should be a little less than 7% if the person has long life expectancy, which is the case with Mrs. Kamal. So probably for her, the HbA1c target should be around 7% or slightly less than that. However, that may be a little difficult seeing the comorbidities like cardiovascular events she has, and also considering the fact that she's also having recurrent episodes of hypoglycemia. But still, we should try to get her HbA1c to less than 7%. Currently, her HbA1c is around 8.4%. So you need to reduce her HbA1c by around 1.4%. And as you know, in diabetes management, we'll be discussing it in subsequent slides also, but no individual drug, even metformin also, generally do not offer you an HbA1c benefit above 1%. So it is clearly evident from her case that she needs at least two oral hypoglycemic agents over and above what she is receiving now. Or if she is convincible, then you can also consider basal insulin, but then probably basal insulin is not much required here. She can be easily managed with two oral anti-hyperglycemic agents, and for that matter, the combination of empagliflozin and linagliptin will be a lucrative choice in her case, seeing her BMI, which is slightly high, and because she also has a concern of not gaining further weight. In fact, she wants to lose weight, and also considering the combination of empagliflozin and linagliptin can give us an HbA1c benefit of close to 1.5% and sometimes slightly more also. Second concern, which the diabetologist or the physician of Mrs. Kamal will be having, is her cardiovascular event, which has happened around 1 year back. So she also has a premature history of CVD in her family, in her father. For that matter, also, addition of an SGLT2 inhibitor is almost must for her because all SGLT2 inhibitors have been shown to be beneficial so far as cardiovascular event reduction is concerned. If we talk about empagliflozin precisely, then in fact, empagliflozin has got most robust evidence of reduction of hard marker like cardiovascular death in patients who are having established cardiovascular disease. For this, for that matter, Mrs. Kamal has got established cardiovascular disease. She was admitted in hospital for acute coronary syndrome 1 year back. So she becomes a most ideal candidate to receive empagliflozin in that sense. And also, the combination of empagliflozin and linagliptin will be beneficial for us, beneficial for her, because linagliptin has shown in both Carmelina and Carolina trial to be CV neutral and also heart failure neutral. Therefore, combination of linagliptin and empagliflozin will be suitable for her so far as CV death reduction is concerned, so far as hospitalization due to heart failure reduction is concerned, and also so far as reduction of 3-point MACE is concerned, also so far as slight reduction of body weight is concerned, and her lipid profile, if you come down to her lipid profile, she is already receiving atorvastatin 40 milligram. So the SGLT2 inhibitor empagliflozin can have slight modest beneficial effect on her lipid profile also. In that sense also it is good. The SGLT2 inhibitor empagliflozin can reduce her systolic and diastolic blood pressure by maybe 2-3 millimeter Hg systolic and by 1-2 millimeter Hg diastolic. So that will also be a welcome point for Mrs. Kamal, because as you see, her blood pressure is 146 by 86 millimeter Hg. But as you know, for diabetics, we should target a blood pressure to less than 130 by 80 millimeter Hg. And in that sense, addition of SGLT2 inhibitor empagliflozin will only benefit her. But again, I will like to reiterate that she is getting losartan 50 milligram OD. So if her renal functions allow otherwise, we can also up titrate the losartan dose to 50 milligram twice daily or 100 milligram once daily. Even that can be beneficial. Also, her empagliflozin in the combination of empagliflozin linagliptin will be beneficial for her so far as heart failure risk reduction is concerned. As you can see, her ejection fraction is 55%, though it is normal, but it is just at the bridge of normal limit. And also she has slightly dilated LA and RA. So that will also be a welcome point, because hospitalization due to heart failure is clearly reduced with empagliflozin. Also, a combination of empagliflozin and linagliptin will be beneficial so far as nephropathy progression is concerned. As per the available data, they suggest that SGLT2 inhibitors are beneficial so far as CKD progression risk reduction is concerned. So as you know, our patient, Mrs. Kamal, has still not developed nephropathy. She has non-proliferative stable retinopathy. And therefore, it will be important for us to consider SGLT2 inhibitors like empagliflozin in her case, so that her nephropathy reduction is risk reduction is concerned. So, so these are the issues which concern Mrs. Kamal. A brief recapitulation of effect of individual drugs: metformin, SGLT2 inhibitors, sulfonylureas, DPP4 and GLP-1 analogs. They are the agents which are used in diabetes management, as you know. Metformin and sulfonylureas can cause an HbA1c reduction of around 1.5%. Metformin is generally considered to have slight beneficial effect so far as ASCVD is concerned, but is neutral so far as congestive heart failure is concerned. It is contraindicated at eGFR of less than 30, and the dose should be reduced to half for eGFR of less than 45. So SGLT2 inhibitors are beneficial so far as ASCVD is concerned, congestive heart failure, that is hospitalization due to heart failure, is concerned. Progression of DKD is concerned. They are to be used extremely cautiously when the eGFR is less than 45, though you can use it till eGFR of 30, but then I will suggest that the renal function should be stable if you use it below eGFR of 45. The sulfonylureas, second generation sulfonylureas like glipizide, glimepiride, and gliclazide, they cause weight gain, but the weight gain is not very much significant. It is modest weight gain. They are neutral so far as ASCVD, heart failure is concerned, or progression of DKD is concerned. DPP4 inhibitors and GLP-1 analog can cause an HbA1c reduction of around 0.8, sometimes a little higher, to around 1%. They do not cause hypoglycemia. GLP-1 analogs can cause weight loss, but then DPP4 inhibitors are contraindicated for hospitalization due to heart failure. Not all DPP4 inhibitors, sorry. Saxagliptin and alogliptin should probably not be used if the patient has got established heart failure, because in the trial, it has been seen, that is SABOT-TIMI 53 trial, it has been seen that saxagliptin has been associated with increased incidences of hospitalization due to heart failure. Similar result has been obtained in the alogliptin CV outcome trial also. Therefore, if the patient is having established heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, then it is always safe to choose DPP4 inhibitors which have proven their CV neutrality so far as heart failure is concerned in the CV outcome trials, and they are linagliptin and sitagliptin. So you can use either of the two. So treatment options of Mrs. Kamal, though we have discussed, there are two options which are relevant here. Either add a combination of SGLT2 and DPP4 inhibitor, or add a basal insulin. I don't think there is a third choice for her. Yes, there can be a third choice of adding a GLP-1 analog, but then GLP-1 analogs are injectable and they are generally less preferred by the patient. So I am not discussing that. So nowadays, the American Diabetes Association and so far as all world bodies, all guidelines like AACE, European Society of Cardiology, they have now placed SGLT2 inhibitors immediately below metformin. In fact, the European one has placed it above metformin also, but that is something which is controversial. So let us avoid that. In all other guidelines, including the ADA 2020, SGLT2 inhibitors have been placed just below metformin as a second line agent of choice. If the renal function of the patient allows and if the patient has comorbidities like atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease established or having high risk factors for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease like angiographically proven coronary artery disease, or in a patient who is having an age of 55 years or more, then probably you should actively consider adding an SGLT2 inhibitor to the patient, irrespective of HbA1c. That means if the patient is having a ACS history, like in our patient, Mrs. Kamal, then too you must consider adding an SGLT2 inhibitor, preferably empagliflozin, because the evidence is more in favor of empagliflozin. But then there are others also, irrespective of HbA1c. So let me make it more clear. Mrs. Kamal had an HbA1c of 8.4%. So in her case, there is no controversy that she needs an empagliflozin. But then what if the HbA1c was 6.5%? I will still suggest that, in fact, it's not I am who is suggesting, it's the ADA 2020 guideline which is suggesting that even at an HbA1c of 6.5, please consider putting Mrs. Kamal on empagliflozin, at least if she has an ACS history. So that's how it is being emphasized in the ADA guideline. Similar is the case of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction and CKD. If the patient is having an EGFR in between 30 and 60 and is stable and have either and or having an urinary ACR particularly above 300 milligram per gram, then you should actively consider putting the patient on an SGLT2 inhibitor, irrespective of what HbA1c the patient has, because these SGLT2 inhibitors have proven their beneficial effect so far as ASCVD event reduction is concerned, hospitalization due to heart failure reduction is concerned, and CKD progression is concerned. That is glycemia legacy. We have all seen this slide in almost all of the diabetes presentation. This is very, very important slide. This talks about early importance of early glycemic control. This is a very interesting slide which says that if the HbA1c of a patient is controlled to less than 7% within 1 year of diagnosis, compared to persons in which the HbA1c remains more than 7% and it is controlled after 1 year of diagnosis. So what happens is at the end of 5 years, in those persons who have been diagnosed, who have been intensively treated right from the diagnosis, and their HbA1c have been reduced to less than 7% right from the diagnosis, they have 67% relative risk reduction so far as MI is concerned, 51% for stroke, 64% for heart failure, and 62% for composite cardiovascular events. So that's something which is, very much surprising that even 1 year of bad glycemic control increases the relative risk of this cardiovascular complications so many times. So that's the importance of early glycemic control. Also, early glycemic control is relevant so far as coronary artery disease is concerned. That has been proven from the study of prevalence of subclinical cardiovascular disease, which is seen in 70% of patients who is having diabetes and 30% of patients who is not having diabetes. The beneficial effect of empagliflozin so far as heart failure is concerned is also being reciprocated in the basic science level study, in which it has been seen that empagliflozin causes reduction in the LV mass index after even 6 months of use. That may be one of the explanation of why we see lesser incidence of hospitalization due to heart failure with empagliflozin. And since there is reduction in LV mass index, so probably there is risk reduction so far as arrhythmia risks are concerned. So that may be one of the reasons why we see cardiovascular death reduction is concerned with empagliflozin so soon after initiation of empagliflozin. In fact, the number needed to treat is very less, and in fact, the time required when you start a patient on empagliflozin and you start ripping out the dividend of reduction in CV debt or 3-point basis, very short, even after 21 to 28 days of use, you start using empagliflozin in the group where you are using compared to in the group where you are not using. Now, Carmelina and Carolina were the two landmark CVOT trials. Carmelina was linagliptin versus placebo, and Carolina was linagliptin versus glimepiride. So linagliptin becomes, after the completion of the Carolina trial, linagliptin becomes the only gliptin in the world currently which has got not one but two CVOT trials with two different agents. One is placebo, sorry, placebo is not an agent, but one with placebo and another with an active agent like sulfonylurea or glimepiride. So linagliptin is one gliptin which has got most robust data sheet so far as CV neutrality is concerned. In both Carmelina and Carolina, linagliptin has proven itself cardiovascularly neutral so far as CV death is concerned, non-fatal MI, non-fatal stroke is concerned, or hospitalization due to heart failure is concerned. In fact, in various across the board subgroup analysis, both in Carmelina and Carolina trial, in all subgroups of patients, even in those who had previous history of heart failure, linagliptin has unambiguously proven its CV neutrality. In the Carolina trial, linagliptin has also proven lesser incidences of hypoglycemia compared to glimepiride, though that is quite expected. I don't know what was there to prove it, but then it has proven itself in the trial. So with this, linagliptin becomes a better gliptin evidence-wise because of more availability of evidence compared to other gliptins. So also we have now the data of Emperor reduced and trial with the empagliflozin, which has published recently in the November 2022. We will be getting the Emperor preserved trial data also sometimes, that is yet to come. We will be also getting the EMPA kidney trial results, which will come at around in the end of 2021. The EMPA kidney trial is a dedicated CKD renal outcome trial with empagliflozin, and the EMPA reduced trial was basically a trial which was done in patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. So it was a trial which was primarily dedicated to see the outcome of heart failure, that is heart failure event reduction with empagliflozin compared to placebo. In this heart failure with reduced ejection fraction trial, the Emperor reduced trial, all the patients who were recruited were having less ejection fraction. In fact, 73% of the patients recruited were having ejection fraction 30% or less, and 80% of patients were having NT-proBNP, which is a marker of heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, 1000 picogram per ml or more. In fact, 48% of patients also had an eGFR of less than 60 ml. So the interesting point of Emperor reduced trial was not all the patients were having diabetes. In fact, only about half of the patients were having diabetes. So half of the patient did not have diabetes. So it was an important trial which extrapolated that whether empagliflozin can be used in patients with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, even in those who were not having diabetes. So let us see the result. The primary endpoint was composite of cardiovascular death or heart failure hospitalization. The primary endpoint reduced 25% relative risk reduction in those who were using empagliflozin compared to placebo, irrespective of diabetes status. So that was statistically superiorly reduced. The secondary endpoints, that is total, that is first and recurrent hospitalization due to heart failure, were also reduced significantly in the empagliflozin arm compared to the placebo arm. So this shows that empagliflozin, so far as the heart failure with heart failure hospitalization reduction is concerned, or so far as composite of cardiovascular death reduction is concerned, acts irrespective of patient being diabetic. So that also emphasizes that probably the mechanism by which the empagliflozin reduces CV death or hospitalization due to heart failure is probably not directly related to the glycemic benefit which empagliflozin gives. It is something which is beyond that. Probably, as I was mentioning, the LV mass index reduction may help in hospitalization due to heart failure reduction, and the reduction in the arrhythmia because of because of the fuel shift which happens by use of empagliflozin. We all know that with use of empagliflozin there is relative increase in ketonemia in the blood, and ketone bodies are favorable fuel for the heart. So this relative fuel shift probably drives the myocardial metabolism favorably and probably reduces the risk of arrhythmias, and that may be one of the reasons why cardiovascular death because of sudden death because of arrhythmias are reduced in empagliflozin compared to the placebo. So these are the clinical implication or rationale. Now, the combination of empagliflozin and SGLT2 inhibitors also has pathophysiological, explanation, because SGLT2 inhibitors are important so that they increase the glucose excretion from the kidney. In the omnious octet, the one of the pathophysiologies of dysglycemia in diabetes is reduction in glucose excretion from kidney because of uptitration of the glut or uptitration of the SGLT, sorry, not glut, uptitration of the SGLT2 receptors or hyperplasia of SGLT2 receptors in diabetes that happens in diabetes, because of which the glucose excretion from kidney is reduced. So SGLT2 inhibitor, they increase the glucose excretion from kidney. And also the DPP4 inhibitor, they help in, correcting the malfunctioning incretin axis by, increasing the GLP-1 level and reducing in the glucagon level. So also the SGLT2 inhibitors, they slightly increase the beta cell insulin secretion, maybe by reduction in glucotoxicity. So maybe this omnious octet, at least 4 or 5 limbs of these omnious octets are cut if you combine SGLT2 inhibitor and DPP4 inhibitor. There is slight reduction in insulin resistance also with the combination of SGLT2 and DPP4 inhibitor. So out of the 8 legs of the octopus, 4 or 5 legs are cut by combining SGLT2 and DPP4. That's the benefit. Also, we have some added benefits so far as renal reduction is concerned, CKD progression, and systolic blood pressure, uric acid reduction is concerned. So these are the benefit combination of SGLT and DPP4 reduces BP, body weight, cardiovascular outcomes, hospitalization due to heart failure, mortality, renal events, microalbuminuria, etc. Glycemia wise also the combination is very fruitful. The combination reduces HbA1c by 1.5% at least, sometimes even higher, 1.8 to 2% reduction is also seen. The combination of EMPA and LINA can cause HbA1c reduction of even 2%. It causes a minimum HbA1c reduction of 1.4 to 1.5 times though. So durable HbA1c response and hypoglycemia risk of empagliflozin is seen compared to sulfonylureas. Obviously, they are a better choice. As I was mentioning, systolic and diastolic BPs are also reduced. And with linagliptin as a combination, what better you can expect, because linagliptin also has shown to reduce the albuminuria progression. And so if you combine Lina with empagliflozin, definitely you are going to get a CKD risk reduction for your patient, because both these agents, particularly empagliflozin, is much more robust so far as CKD progression is concerned, and also linagliptin will be helping empagliflozin. So safety wise also they are safe. This is just a summary of EMPA-REG outcome canvas program and declared TIMI. As you can see, the empagliflozin is superior so far as HHF and CV death reduction is concerned, and also the 3-point MES and renal outcome reduction is concerned. These are not class effect, because in ertugliflozin, we did not see any benefit so far as 3-point MES is concerned. ERTU could only prove itself non-inferior so far as 3-point MES reduction is concerned. So that indicates that this 3-point MES superiority is something which is not class effect, because there were some criticism, like earlier there were some people used to say that since declared TIMI 58 came, that dapagliflozin, they incorporated many healthy patients, relatively healthy patients who were not having a history of cardiovascular disease, and because of that declared TIMI 58 patient, they did not have superiority so far as 3-point MES is concerned. Otherwise, SGLT2 inhibitors has got that it can be a class effect, the CV risk reduction, but then ertugliflozin Vertis CV trial It incorporated all patients, just like EMPA-REG outcome. All the patients were having established CVD, but still they were non-inferior so far as 3-point MACE is concerned. So what I mean to say is empagliflozin has something special to deal with. It's not a class effect. Renal and CV outcome combination, which we have discussed. So, just to summarize, greater HbA1c reduction, lesser risk of hypoglycemia, early achievement of glycemic goal, added benefit of potential BP loss, slight BP reduction also. So thank you. The session is over from my side.